Welcome back, folks. Today I have a friend, an awesome human. He's over the pond, as they would say, right? From the States, Mr. Jim Hughes. And quick context for how Jim has been part of my life. I met him a few years ago through our Brave community, where we got to meet with other extraordinary humans and doing in the world of coaching and self-discovery and all the stuff that Jim and I geek out on. However, Jim and I also are huge advocates for nature. So he's one of the people that I know is always exploring outdoors and testing his limits there, which we're going to talk about today in some beautiful way. And he's a guy that I get to laugh with, that I get to smile with. The second we jumped on Zoom today, even before recording, I just found my body lighting up and being like, "Oh, it's a friend, someone who gets me, someone who knows me." So that's how I would describe you. But as we do on this show, who is Jim Hughes?
Well, before we get into any of this, after that big intro, I'll do my best to undermine this podcast and to tense you up, to make you question whether
Yep.
you're doing the right thing or not. How about we go down that route? That might be more interesting.
Yes,
But
please do.
no, it's a pleasure, Ali. I always enjoy our conversations, every single one of them, whether they've been in Ireland in a deeply emotional group setting, or at the top of a
Mhm.
mountain, or on Zoom since. But yeah, my name's Jim Hughes. I am the founder of my coaching company called Untamed, which I set up way back when, now in March 2017. Uh, I was a nomad for the first 3 and a bit years of that business adventure, and have since been become an adult, sort of, in the southwest of England, where I'm married to my lovely wife Kim, and father of an amazing little son called Teddy, who's just coming up to 2. And as you mentioned, the work that I do and the play that I do involves getting outside as much as possible. So I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit more.
Same, brother. Yes, thank you. Let's get right into that. So, where did it start? If you go back, like where did this desire, passion, interest, whatever you want to call it, however you want to label it, where did it start to get outside, to test, to seek adventure?
Of right from the beginning, we were raised in the countryside, and I don't mean like American countryside. We don't really have wilderness like you guys do, with 60 million
Good.
people crammed into a very small place. But it was in the countryside nonetheless, like 30-minute drive from the nearest city where I went to school and where my friends all lived. And but we had quarter an acre of land, which in the UK, believe it or not, is a lot.
Hmm.
And we had a pond. My dad built us a den on stilts. We had a little slope come down to the pond.
Mm.
He built us a den, and we kind of learned how to like put nails in and use ropes and try and climb up the outside of it.
Yes.
We used to go off into the fields, and we'd get, when the wind was blowing the right way, my dad could go to the end of our sort of field and whistle, and you could hear it over like 3 fields. And that
Wow.
would mean time to come back because it's tea time. And it's so cliche. Like we decided, the movement of the sun would determine when we were due home, not anything else. That was it. A lot of the time, I was the youngest of 3 brothers, and we just spent a lot of time in outside and just playing and exploring. And my mum recently reminded me, as my son is getting to a similar age, where there's a photograph of me in my breakdown truck, tow truck as you guys would call it, is my little
Mm.
toy.
Mhm.
And we were building an extension on the house at the time, and I was in the footings, like down in the sort of trenches, just asleep in my truck. People had sort of forgotten that I was there, and I was just so exhausted from playing. I was just in my little onesie, covered in mud, just like fast asleep in this thing. So, mate, it goes right back to the beginning, and there's many a gnarly story of what my brothers forced me slash encouraged me slash coaxed me to do. The fact I'm
Mm.
still here to this day is quite surprising.
Yeah, wow. Oh, as I hear that, I'm creating a vision of what it was like. It sounds so free and beautiful. Like we came inside when the sun went down. There's a part of me today that believes like that's the way to live.
Mm.
Yet it's not what most of us do, right? We reject this and we create our other normalizations around all the things, you know. And so I love just going back and envisioning what that was like. I had similarly one of my favorite things to do that related to that type of freedom was just explore my backyard and climb trees. And we didn't have a lot of space growing up. You know, we had a very modest house with modest land and neighbors, but man, the backyard, the trees, it felt like my playground. It felt like, oh, this is where I get to be and explore and test myself. We would climb so high. We were probably like 7 years old, Jim, and me and my good friend Nathan would climb so high in the trees that our parents would come out and be like, you guys need to get down right now. Like they'd be terrified. And we just thought it was like every day, let's just go out there and see if we could go one branch higher and maybe touch a cloud, you know?
But I mean, what you just touched on there, it's fear, isn't it? It's fear usually being imposed on you by your parents or guardians or society, which has probably fed their fear.
Yeah.
And that's what stops so many people. And the reality is just so different from my parents are boomers, baby boomers is a phrase over here, probably not relevant in the US. But you know, they're in the mid 70s. Their childhood was 10 times more outdoor
Mm.
led, risky than ours was even. And that just doesn't every generation comes along, they just remove more and more risk,
Yep.
more and more adventure. They replace it with structure, they replace it with walls, they replace it with boundaries, mental, physical. And it's I think aside from lots of other things, which probably won't have time to cover in this conversation, but we're seeing the negative impacts that's having on young people now and
Right.
how they can handle life, how they can face uncertainty, resilience. It's a sad state of affairs, and I think a lot of that comes down to how much adventure were you exposed to as a child and allowed to discover for yourself.
Totally, man. I totally agree. You're right. We could jam on that only and spend hours because I have a lot of thoughts, even belief systems around this. Um, I'm called to get people outside and help them unplug. And I feel so aligned that we need that. I need that. I've experienced it. My family needs that. My friends, my community, and the world needs that. Yet you nailed it. We've become really comfortable and conditioned to create structures and comfort. And like I want to be clear. I don't think people need to always test their comfort zone and their growth zones and always seek the thrill. Like there is a balance. But I see so many people that never do it, that
Mm.
just live the easy life, which in my family we say hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life. And so I find myself in daily interactions just analyzing like, am I taking an easy choice right now or a hard choice? And to your point, getting outdoors, seeking some form of adventure, there's so much growth in that that the world, I believe, has forgotten, you know?
Yeah, and it's very easy to judge people who don't, or generations that don't. I know, you know, previous generations would judge the youngsters now, but humans have always chosen the path of least resistance. They've always chosen to maximize their comfort. It's just when we were hunter-gatherers, we didn't have that. So
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
they didn't spend all the time outdoors because they could. They spent it because they had to. They were really fit and able and great at climbing and living off the land because they had to survive. If they were our conditions now, obviously it would be jarring, but if somehow we found ourselves in those positions, that's how we would be.
Hmm.
If they had access to iPhones back then, they would use them. So it's not like we're worse human beings. It's just we're taking advantage of what we have created in order to make our life easy. But the downside is we've had, arguably, and I don't know where the line is, too much of it.
Hmm.
So our body doesn't experience the same stresses that it used to. We get that sort of chronic um, drip feeding of stress through conversations at work, through financial threats, through falling out with our spouses. We don't get the acute stress which our body has been evolved to need in order to grow. The acute
Hmm.
stress that comes from feeling like your life's in danger, from being in the severe cold, from being severely hungry,
Right. Very different.
and that's where that, intentionally I bring those things into my life every now and again. Sometimes regular, like cold water therapy, for example, regular times per week, because I know that my body's going to benefit from it. My body where it sends my body into shock and my body goes, I'm
Yeah.
in like survival mode, and then all loads of good stuff happen because it's only going to happen for a short amount of time, and then I revert, rather than this chronic underlying just drip, 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 drip of stress, which is killing so many of us.
Yes. Oh man. So yes, I love that. Chronic versus acute stress very differently. One is kind of fabricated from all the comfort and conditioning that we've become used to. The other is part of being human. It's like we need the shock every now and then.
Yeah.
It's funny, man. I look at my dogs, and then when I'm out in the wilderness, if I run into like deer or other animals, like I often look at them as the model for how to handle stress and how to handle even trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know enough now that they're capable of feeling the entirety of it and shaking it out of their system. Whereas so much of what I've learned in studying humans is that we just absorb and keep it. We just absorb and keep it and stuff it and suppress it, all the things that have been talked about. This is known now. But what's fascinating is we continue to do it. Like we're learning so much about this. And so I'll shift a little bit into some of the work you do. I've always been impressed with your skills in seeing people, holding space for them. As a friend, I feel like when we talk, and we don't talk all the time, but when we do catch up every several months, I know that there's a part of Jim Hughes that can hold space for me if I'm in a heavy season or if I'm in a light season and we're just jamming on adventure like this. And so I think my question for you is that when did the Untamed brand start coming out of you, which is a beautiful name, by the way, and you feel free to share on that. But when did that, when did your desire for adventure start to blend into supporting people, whether that's life coaching or just Jim Hughes being able to hold space?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I appreciate the feedback. And when I settled on the name, I was like, yes, this feels right on so many
Mm.
levels. And there's many sort of paths I could take to answer that question because there's a lot of layers, and I'm conscious that we could be here all day. But
Sure, sure.
the to sort of clarify one thing, the incorporating the outdoors and adventure into my work on a regular basis is a relatively new thing for the
Hmm.
simple reason that for the first 3 years we were living all around the world. I did everything on Zoom,
Mm.
so our calls were like this.
Hmm.
It's only since being a homeowner and working with more local people that I can take people out and sort of adventure with them and spend half a day together
Right.
hiking and all that stuff.
Mm.
Um, so the name Untamed wasn't necessarily, oh, I want to help people get outside. That it was more of a philosophical, emotional untaming, where
Mm.
as a lot of business owners, I was trying to scratch my own itch, and I had gotten into a place. I was running an engineering business in Australia, and I'd gotten into a place where I was misaligned. I was muting my personality. I
Mm.
was stunting myself. And because I didn't know who I was trying to be who I thought others needed me to be. And I just so happened to be in a place where the rules of the game, the vibe of the industry was about being old, embittered, ruthless, hard. It was the mining industry in Australia, and it was just so far away from my people that.
Mm.
But I didn't know that, so I changed myself to fit in, and I was working in an office. I was commuting in a car every day to an industrial estate. I was talking to people I didn't really like. I was selling something I didn't really care about in an industry that wasn't aligned with me. And after a while, after the excitement of the opportunity wore off, because it was an amazing opportunity I was given, I'm not bemoaning it,
Sure.
because I'd never had a proper job before, and I was all of a sudden running this engineering company that was, multi-million dollar. So I learned loads, but then after a while, I was like, this is not worth the juice is not worth the squeeze. I am stressed here. And I didn't before that I didn't associate with the word stress. I just thought
Mm.
that was for weak people.
Right.
And then the more I started to connect with my own uh, feelings, the more I realized actually, wow, I'm really stressed. I'm doing all the things I just said, muting myself. And so I realized I need to chart a new path. I need to become the person who I want to be and who I am at my core. How do I do that? So I just learned as much as I could about psychology, about entrepreneurship. I realized I wanted to run my own business at one point. So then it was like, okay, what business is it? Who do I want to serve? How do I want to serve them? And I remember playing with this idea that because I've always been quite a rambunctious, high energy sort of irritant to a lot of people that doesn't fit in with a lot of sort of stilted environments and the environment that just so happened to be that I was in. And so there's something like, oh, I really want to help people like the sort of the rough diamonds of the world. No, that's not right. I'm not a rough diamond. It's not like I've been in crime or anything like that. How can I describe it? Unearthing, but wow, what is it? And then I settle on this idea of untaming. It's like this idea of just allowing yourself to flourish and rather than changing yourself to fit into your environment, changing your environment to suit you and to allow you to thrive. So initially starts with people like me, and then it just broadens. Actually, no, it's anybody who's hiding their true self or not connected to it.
Mhm.
They're who I want to work with, and then it transformed into they're who I want to hold space for, and then it transformed into they're who I want to hold space outside for, because that's where I'm most alive.
I love that, man. Wow. So I love the evolution of that. I also have to share that when I first learned or filtered that word through you, it instantly made me think of my wild self. And some of the time I've had with you, like you said, in Ireland and just these meaningful moments, there's a sense of knowing that Jim brings his wild self. Whether that's through your thoughtful questions, or it's through the runs we have, or it's just through the way that you kind of introduce play more than other people. And so your story makes perfect sense to me. And I don't think, I know I align better with people who are willing to show parts of their wild self. I was just talking about this with my kiddos during breakfast this morning. We have a fun game that my wife plays with my daughter, who's 6. Of, can you please comb your hair? Right? Because she's got this beautiful hair and she wakes up and it's all over the place. And I come from a different stance, Jim. I'm like, let her be with the wild hair. Like, what are you? And I try not to go into coach mode and say like, well, this is really about you, Gabrielle. You're just scared she's going to go to school and you're going to be a mom that lets her daughter go to school with wild hair. Like that's probably the truth if you're willing to face it. But instead, I like to just kind of watch and listen and say, well, I love your wild hair, Sepia. I think you should choose if you want to comb it. So it's this interesting game, but it actually comes back down to a really important principle is how much are we willing to be with our wild self?
Mm.
And so as I heard you say some of those things that you learned in your journey, I felt muted. Like that's big, right? I felt like I couldn't be like the way I wanted to be. This is the story for so many people. When we get to the root of what's really challenging them, there's different variables, but ultimately their truth is I can't be myself. And I believe there's a part of your wildness that wants to come through, you know? It's
Yeah,
that's untamed. It's like being untamed enough to realize that, to
yeah,
acknowledge that.
yeah. And just to clarify, I for me, it was about certainly becoming more wild, becoming allowing my energized, sort of playful, childish self to come out. It's not like that for everybody. Other people have
Yeah.
their own versions of it.
Mhm.
So I'm not here saying you should be this, you should be that. I'm also very conscious that I was fortunate that even when I was at my most muted and sort of repressed state, I was still, those things would still come out. They were never fully down. And I have always benefited from being the youngest of three. I was allowed to be a child a
Mhm.
lot longer than typically an oldest child often is. And I've worked with a lot of young, like as a coach, I've worked with a lot of youngest children and I've worked with a lot of oldest children. Obviously, they're
Mhm.
adults when I work with them.
Mhm.
And the amount of times the older sibling feels the burden of being the grown up one, often in times of trouble
Mhm.
with their parents, they are thrust into the role of man or woman of the house. I had my two brothers before me, sort of subconsciously sort of carving a path and allowing me to be that. And I'm sure that if I was the older brother, I probably wouldn't be able to access this childlike state as readily as I could. Um, I suppose a quick story that may be useful for your listeners who may be like, oh, how did you know that that was your thing, or how did you know you could access it? I remember I was dating a girl when I lived in Whistler, I was in a ski resort, and that was all about play.
Mhm.
And I was dating a girl who was a few years older than me, and she was wise. much wiser than I was, and she said, "You." She didn't phrase it as maybe as eloquently as this. She's probably looking back, it's probably an insult actually, but she was like, you are amazing at, or you have a knack of finding the alpha male in the room and just cutting them down to size and
Mhm.
getting them to do what you want them to do in a really childlike, playful way.
Yeah.
Usually sort of quite homoerotic, just to make them feel awkward. I don't know. Wow, actually, that's so true. I know I didn't know why I was doing it. It was only years later I could join the dots. It was like I could see that they were trying to be cooler than they really were, and I wanted to bring out the childish, playful self. And by me being that, I could invite them to be that.
Right.
My work now is just it's just a more mature, perhaps more purposeful version of that. It's fascinating when you look back.
Dude, yes. I mean, as you're sharing that, I fall into the older brother use case is that it took me time to reclaim my wildness, my sovereignty around being how I want to be. And that has a different different shades of responsibility, of leadership, all kinds of things I could try to, describe, but so much of it feels like a native thing to, growing up in a family and having different degrees of freedom, which is really cool. So thank you for that. I also wanted to reflect that that's part of your gift. So that's part of what I see and I've felt and sensed in you is that not everyone has that. So you have a degree of capacity to be untamed, to be wild, and then share it with others as you were sharing in that story. So I love that. The other thing, and this is kind of related. Actually, no. What I wanted to do is shift. This is very related, but I know that if I ask more questions on Untamed Adventure, we might like talk, this will be a 3 hour podcast. So what I wanted to do is shift into your newsletter. Here's why. I've been reading your newsletter for over a year now. It's a beautiful newsletter. It's short and concise and powerful. I always read it and learn something. I always read it and find myself nodding and being like, yes, thanks, Jim. Like that's real. That's part of my truth. And so what I did is I went back and just bullet pointed some of the things that I've learned or read through you this last year. So I want to honor you for that. I also want to acknowledge some of these things and then allow you to share whatever you want to share. So we'll go back to um, the beginning of this year. You said something, and I'm just going to summarize these and then let you play with whatever you want to play with. You summarized the concept of flow, not force. Does that feel familiar?
Yes, it's a phrase I've said many times.
Okay, yes. So I'm going to say something else and then give you some space to say what you want. You use some words around this concept being able to let go of the need to control outcomes and instead using energy to find the beauty in any given moment. This is so real for me. This comes to the roots of awareness and presence, which are two things I practice rigorously. And um, there's a relationship to acceptance. So being able to accept any moment and flow with it instead of, like you said, trying to control it. So take us back or take us to where you are today with that. Like, what would you share around flow, not force?
I would say that is probably one of the belief shifts or conceptual shifts I've been the most proactive in making in the last number of years. That is not necessarily my default. I'm not saying it's not innate. I'm saying it's
Right.
not my learned default mode.
Mhm.
I was raised in a family that were very alpha. Even my mum's, she retired now, but she ran a business for 40 years in a male dominated industry. She had to live with a alpha husband and three boys who were all trying to be their own sort of real men and tough and riddled with criticism and everything else. It was a tough, it was an intense household.
Mhm.
Competition was rife.
Mhm.
Um, and very masculine in its energy. And I'm sure you agree or believe that masculine energy is about finding the quickest way to get from point A to point B. It
Sure,
doesn't
sure.
Masculine doesn't really deal in binary. It's not necessarily about acceptance. It's more about making shit happen,
Yes. Yeah.
problem solving, and that's the way I was raised. And there was very little room for sitting with in my house. There's very little room for ambiguity. And I lived like that throughout my 20s and early 30s, where the more I felt that if I wanted to make something happen, I needed to control the situation. I needed to control me.
Mm.
It was all about doing. It was all about no, not necessarily planning, because I've never been a huge planner, but it was about force.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to create something, you had to put in the work. You had to do something. And I read a book. We were nomads still. It was our last stop before COVID prevented us from being nomadic travelers anymore. And we were in the mountains in Bulgaria. And it was actually during lockdown. And we thankfully we lived in a house right on the edge of the forest. The snow had melted by this point. It was like May time, and I was doing regular hikes through the mountains to get out of the house. And I listened to the Surrender Experiment.
Right.
And that was one of by Michael Singer, for those who don't know, and it was one of the most transformational books that I've ever listened to. And it's an extreme version of just basically saying yes and going with whatever the universe throws at you.
Right.
And I don't think anybody really could live in the same way again. But it just opened my eyes to, look, hang on, if something's not working, stop it. Or if you've just tried to create a coaching program, and I was in the middle of COVID had happened, and I was trying to create an online course to help those who were struggling with COVID. It's
Mm.
not my bag. I knew it wasn't my bag. I had a guy working for me, and I felt the need to give him a job. So I was trying to engineer the situation, and it just wasn't working. There was just evidence after evidence after evidence that this was not the path I should be pursuing. And
Mm.
rather than doubling down, I was like, what if I just listened to that evidence and went, cool, this just means something, and I will go with the flow, and I will stop doing it,
Mhm.
and I will see where my energy takes me. And that was just a really big moment, that I haven't approached life, or especially business, the same ever since. I'm now so much more attuned to what the signals may be, where my energy's at with it, whether I should stop, whether I should just listen, whether I should change, whatever. And it's so much more relaxing. It's so much more empowering. It's so much less exhausting.
Mm.
And I think it's such a powerful shift that most of the Western world is not necessarily programmed to think like.
Dude, yes. Wow, that's so real. That's real for me. And what's fascinating is you said that was about 2020, 2020 when you read that book. Dude, that might have been the same time I read that book. And that book was certainly my first taste of like, oh, there's a different way to just let life happen
Yeah,
instead of the controlling, the by me philosophy. I have to craft my destiny. There's energy in that, but there's so much energy in also just allowing things to flow. And then again, the word that comes after that for me is often acceptance because what I've experienced, Jim, is that there's that flow and letting things go and being with them, but then that still evokes things. It evokes decisions, it evokes emotions, it evokes a way to still be with the flow that's presenting itself. And then the game becomes acceptance. I was just talking about this again this morning with my kiddos and my wife. Like, am I willing to accept this and checking in? Because sometimes we're not, and that's fine. It's not like, oh, I have to flow with everything and accept everything. But yes, the surrender experiment was a beautiful story about a very wild journey where Michael Singer learned to flow with things and start to accept them. This is perfect. It's a beautiful segue into something else that you've written about recently, and that's drive and contentment. So just like as you're talking about, there's this masculine drive energy, and then there's this content state, which can relate more to the feminine and being being at peace or finding,
Yeah.
not such a driven mode. And then as you started to write about like how do these coexist? Can they coexist? So tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a recent discovery in terms of like putting a name to it.
Yeah.
Again, it's a shift I've made. I suppose it has been conscious more recently than the surrendering idea. And it was the post was sparked by and I think I described it in the newsletter as a vigorous conversation. I
Mhm.
didn't name who the conversation was with in the newsletter, I feel safe to do so here. It was my brother, who
Uh-huh.
is when it comes to force versus flow, he is 99% in the force
Hmm.
category.
Hmm.
Like it's brilliant and painful to behold. Um, so this conversation, we were lubricated by alcohol at this stage, I have to say, which probably made it more vigorous than it would have done otherwise. But I shared with him that I've exploring. So he's making a transition out of the military. He's been in the military 20 years.
Okay.
He is gripping the situation with the way he grips anything. He is a very driven, very hard-working bloke. And to be fair, he is running like hell to make sure he makes the transition as successful as he can. Every
Hmm.
meeting, every phone call, LinkedIn this, LinkedIn that, connection this, seminar that, which is exactly what I did when I first started Untamed.
Hmm.
So I don't know how it came up to be, but he is. I've worked with him on like 3 or 4 calls during this transition to kind of help explore a few ideas because I work with a lot of military veterans,
Hmm.
and I shared with him this idea, an alternative reality where he might just be content.
Hmm.
And it blew his mind. And he basically said, "So you're content? You say you're content, Jim?" I said, "Well, getting there, sitting with it more than I ever have been." He's like, "How do you feel?" And he caveated it, to be fair. He said, "How do you feel about the fact you've cashed your chips in before you've got to 40?" And I said, "No." Believing I knew what he meant by that phrase, I wanted to clarify it. And he said, basically, sort of accepting what you've got and that it's not going to get any better or different.
Hmm.
And I thought that was a fascinating concept to challenge. It's like,
Hmm.
I think Sam, said the fact that I am content doesn't mean I don't have drive. I wouldn't run a business if I didn't have drive. I wouldn't go to networking events till 9 p.m. if I didn't have drive. I wouldn't write a newsletter every week for 7 years if I didn't have drive. Like,
Hmm.
but it doesn't mean they are mutually exclusive. And
Hmm.
I'm toying with it. I'm not yet fully like nailed it. It's not fully clear in my mind, but this idea between having ambition but enjoying the journey and being grateful for what I have right now,
Hmm.
which feels like a journey from a place of love rather than from a place of fear, which I think is where a lot of drive comes from. I
Hmm.
need to I need to grow, I need to achieve, I need to be better to avoid feeling not enough, to avoid feeling insignificant, to avoid feeling like I've failed, or to avoid rejection, to avoid judgment.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's an interesting dance, and I'm not there yet, and I wouldn't say I'm perfectly content either, but I'm far more content than I ever was with where I'm at, and I'm balancing the two. So interesting place to be.
Wow. Yes. Yes, again. So that's interesting because my younger brother is also in a really big transition, moving back here from China. It's bringing me so much joy because I get my brother back and I want to see him and his family grow and thrive closer to us. And there's some similar challenges here, some similar drive energy I'm actually experiencing, where he wants to have clarity on how is this going to work out. And I can tell he's under some stress and pressure to make all the moves and all the things happen. That's fine. That's human. But what's really interesting about what you shared is that years ago, I found myself always in drive mode. Whether it's like your brother, like you, like whoever, it was just there was always something to do. And that served me in a way where I just built all kinds of awesome work ethic and did all these things. Like metaphorically, I was just climbing all kinds of mountains. It was great. Um, Today, I like to climb physical mountains for very different reason, to be clear. But what I learned and again, why I enjoyed reading what you wrote about recently is that always being in drive mode does not serve me. It's like a car that's always going. It's like there is a reason the car has a brake or can downshift and can be turned off at times. And dude, to bring this back to nature, adventure, getting outside, one of the times where I could tell you with complete clarity and conviction that I feel content, I feel peace, I feel nourished is after I've had this amazing 2, 3 day, even a full day hike, sometimes by myself or with people who are intentionally going outdoors to explore, to, engage in retreat, self-discovery. When I come back from that, I'm content. Dude, it happens often now. Like I'll literally sit, whether it's like in my den or I'll go out in my grass in my backyard and I'll sit and I'll just experience that I don't need anything right now. And that's a beautiful place to be. Now, that usually lasts a few days. Right? And then I get up and the drive comes back like, oh, I want to go build something or create something or talk or hang. So I think there's this beautiful way for them to coexist. And there is no right or wrong from my perspective. There's no, you gotta have 80% drive, 20%, content. You gotta find that out for yourself. At least that's what I believe. But to reemphasize, I believe that both do coexist. I think it's unhealthy to have one or the other dominate, whether it's all drive or people that are all content and never seek any sort of growth,
I think a really so to touch on the mountain metaphor, but and also practical is the difference between hiking one physically and what a lot of people do climbing the mountains metaphorically is that people climbing them metaphorically often don't turn around to admire the view.
Right.
They get to the top and they go, "Oh, that wasn't the summit I thought it was.
Yep.
Turns out it's a false summit. There's another summit
Yep.
and another summit and another summit." And they're not enjoying the hike and they're not enjoying the views either. And the summit never ever gets there.
Dude.
Um,
Yes.
but I think a more important question, I think maybe on reflection, drive versus contentment, because obviously I don't think they are versus, they can coexist. I think a more important question around drive is where is it coming from? Is it coming from a place of fear and scarcity,
Mhm.
i.e., I'm trying to avoid, I'm moving away from feeling insignificant, insecure, all those things I mentioned, or am I moving towards growth, towards fulfillment, towards adding more value, towards feeling more connected and fulfilled?
Yes. Oh, yes. That's paramount. I mean, there's such a different energy there. There's purpose, intention. Dude, it reminds me of this thing that I was musing on recently around running because I love to hike, climb mountains, get outside. I also like to run. And the other day, Jim, I'm running, and I think this day I was in a stressed state, the chronic stress to your point earlier. And I just reflected, I was like, oh, I'm running from this right now. I'm running away from this. Like I'm running because I want to soothe that I don't want to be with this, this pain or this suffering, whatever it is, it's presenting itself. And running in that context was a form of like, I'm gonna leave that and I'm gonna do all the things that I know will physically allow me to feel a little bit better, etc. In contrast, I've had different experiences where I've been running towards creativity. I've been running towards like this idea or this attraction towards something that lights me up. And I'm just recognizing that in real time with you, the same way that you said, like, where's the drive coming from? Energetically, I could be doing something like running, but it's different in kind of the source of it. Like, am I running away just to feel better, or am I running towards something like, wow, because I'll have such moments of clarity when I run and sweat, especially when it's just in nature or with music, like not words. And then on the other side, like I've noticed that that could actually also be a numbing mechanism where I'm like, I'm running because I want to stuff this away. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think any habit, especially taken to the extreme, if it is an extreme thing, I'm not saying running is with you, obviously, but there's a lot of people I know who do things on a very, very, very regular basis. And when it comes
Mhm.
to that level, there's always a question from me, whether it's I actually ask it or not is a different question of where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's an addiction. We both know, I'm sure, people who are addicted to their careers, to their business,
Mhm.
to physical exercise, to whatever it might be. The obvious ones are like gambling and spending money and shopping, but working, running. They can also be addictions. They can also
Yes.
be they are distracting techniques. They are masking techniques. They are a fear-based tool to help us feel the way we want to feel, and it's not always coming from that best place. So to your point, if you can check in as you're either before or after whatever, where it's coming from, it's a really important question to ask.
Indeed. Okay. This is again beautiful because it transitions into the last concept I wanted to jam with you on, and that is you shared in your newsletter again. If you haven't noticed, by the way, this is a plug for Jim's newsletter, so we're gonna figure out how to get everyone subscribed to that after this podcast. But you wrote something about conventional business wisdom and Jason Fried. And again, dude, this is one of those moments where I'm like, what? He also follows Jason Fried? Because Jason Fried is someone I've been paying attention to back into my dude, late 20s, early 30s, so like a decade now. And I've always respected his ideals. I'm like, that's a guy who's doing business differently. That's a guy that I'd follow, or walk with for different reasons. And one of the things you shared was that Jason challenges the conventional business wisdom that glorifies speed and complexity while ignoring the risk of inorganic growth and scaling for scaling's sake. So that phrase is a podcast in itself. But what I love about that and what you shared in relation to what you've learned from Jason and then what you have been practicing and pondering on are the questions that you pose, which I'm going to also read. So Jim's questions. Why am I really doing this? With an emphasis on really. Is this what I truly want, or just what I've been led to believe is the only path to success? And then the third question, might I actually find a simpler, slower, more deliberate path more fulfilling? These questions are genius. They're beautiful. Um, and of course, I have my biased, perspective here, but I think there's so much depth in in these questions and the gravity of what they can help us realize the clarity, we can find from them. This came up just the other day. I have a friend who shared something around being deep in his career and thinking he needs to go and make this big shift into the, you know, um, new territory. Uh, and I quickly found myself realizing like, yo, is this what you really want? Like, or are you just doing this because this is the system, the proven method, et cetera? So without getting too distracted on that scenario, tell me about these questions and how you use them, how you support people with them.
Well, I think I don't know if I knew it at the time, not consciously anyway, but those questions, as you fed them back to me, I think they are probably the essence of my entire reason for Untamed existing.
Mm,
It is to help people, and I did a workshop on this 2 weeks ago, which might have partly been the inspiration of the post or vice versa. The helping people figure out the difference between a should and a want, and helping people carve a more authentic and aligned path. And my tagline of the company is for Untamed is to know yourself and find your playground. And
mhm.
when you're doing things for the shoulds, because that's who you feel you need to be in order to be seen, in order to be enough, in order to be successful, in order to be wealthy, whatever, then you're not in your playground. And I don't think you're ever going to feel that sense of peace and
Yep.
fulfillment. So being able to just check in right from the beginning and go, this path I'm on, is this a should or a want? And if it's a want, is it a really want? And I have in the workshop, and I've been asking this question for a few years. I call it the 3 levels of want, because finding, unearthing what you really want, that's why I put that in italics in the post, is it's challenging. It's a simple question, but it's loaded.
Yep.
The answer is loaded.
Mhm.
There's potential. If you name what you really want, you're going to be judged, you're going to be outcast, you're going to undermine all of the efforts you've made over the last number of years, energetically and financially. You're going to piss people off, you're going to prove that you were choosing the wrong path in the first place, which then, so you've got the sunk cost bias, you've got loads of things in there. And then you've got the, oh crap, now I know what I need to do. Oh, that means I have to do it now. And if I don't do it, then I'm X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
So there's loads of reasons why we don't even ask the question.
Yep.
So the maybe we're going off on a little bit of a rabbit hole, down a rabbit hole here, but maybe we're not. The exercise I get people to figure out this question, to answer the question is first level, up to this point in your life, what do you feel your days, and I break it down to just days because that's easy to figure out. What do you feel your days should involve up to now? And people go, oh, networking,
Easy for
workout,
them to answer that. Yeah. Yeah.
time with my kids, all of the shoulds. They get all the shoulds out of the system and they go, okay, put them aside. Let's forget whether they're viable, whether you have to do them or not. Next question. What would you want to include on a day-to-day basis in your life?
Mhm.
And then people go, okay, well, I know what I don't want. I'd probably do less of that and I'd probably less of that. And maybe I'd like to do a bit more time outside. Maybe I want to do a bit more of this. Maybe I want to run my own business. And then I go, okay, cool. Now we've got that level out of the way. So we're basically just we're dropping down layers and we're getting rid of the fears and the expectations and the judgments and all that stuff. And then the final question, and I get people into the right state in order to do this, and that is a state of being relaxed. I get people to do some deep breaths, close their eyes, visualize them when they're in a moment of peace or flow or contentment. And I say, okay, now forgetting all of that, forgetting what you believe is rational, feasible, viable, forgetting the potential impacts. When you're really honest with yourself, if you're in a quiet room and no one would ever hear, what do you deeply yearn for?
Hmm.
And you don't have to do anything with the answer. That's when people, if they allow themselves, can drop in and go, oh my God.
Mhm.
I did this exercise with a former client, retired army colonel, like lad's lad, you know.
Mhm.
First level was all about business. It was about meeting people. It was about adding value. It was blah, blah, blah. And then the next level down was okay. I'd do less of the meetings, but I'd do more of the other stuff. And then the third level was I just want to be in my farm and I want to write.
Yep.
I want to be outside and I want to write. So those to kind of circle it back if it's not too circuitous, it's about asking yourself whether the path you're on is from a should or a want. And if it is a should, what do you really want?
Mhm.
Because you may find that when you're honest with yourself, the need for speed, the need for constant drive, achievement, success, they may slowly fade, and you may be more replaced. They may be replaced with a more deliberate, slower version of life, which may feel a lot more fulfilling and ultimately add a lot more value and allow you to get to the place that you actually want to get to, but in a much more enjoyable way.
Mm. That, yeah, let that land. So if you're listening, let that land. There's so much wisdom in that. There's so much courage in, like you said, in being willing to answer those questions. I think that's the part, to reflect and just kind of re-summarize. So many of us live in this world of expectations, and we create all these stories about what we should do. I call them should bombs. I write about this frequently and or talk about this as well. It's like, oh, another should bomb there. I pause when I use that word. I don't use it often now because I'm very aware of it, of the power it brings. And it's just a word that gets used all the time. You should do this, you should do that. People don't even realize how much they project through that word. Sometimes there's a authentic use case for it. If someone's deeply asking, like, Jim, I need help. What should I do? I respect that. But the constant shoulds lives in this realm of expectation. Then to your point, when someone actually asks, like, what do I want? They start to shift to creativity, right? They start to shift to some agency. Like, what do I want? And most people don't even ask that because they're so stuck in the expectation
Yeah.
world, like you said. But that third level that you take people to, that's the magic. That's where I describe it as like the sovereignty, the truth, where the soul emerges like, yo, this is what I really want, what I want to create, what I want to be with,
Yeah.
where like my essence, my going back to what we said, my untamed wild self can come out, dude. That's the magic. And yeah, that's the tragedy, if I'm being real, where I feel a lot of sadness is that people don't get there. They don't even give themselves space to ask that question.
No.
They're
No.
scared. They're terrified of what it could cause, which again, most of the time is a story. So and so is going to get upset. That's a story. This is going to collapse. That's another story. And granted, these stories can be heavy, but there's no truth in them unless you face the question, unless you walk that path. So props to you
The,
for doing that work, man.
yeah, well, thank you. The third, by the time you get to the third level, in my experience, the answers are so much simpler.
Mm.
Life at third level is simpler, which is why I asked the question in the newsletter the way I did. It's usually about connection
Mhm.
with loved ones, with themselves, with nature. It's usually about presence, and I don't mean Christmas presents. It's it's fascinating, and I suppose I want to qualify it. And I say this every time I ask the question or run a workshop or do a talk on this. I am not advocating the hedonistic, selfish pursuit of life at all costs. Life is about relationships. It's about helping, supporting, facilitating other people in their life. Because if you were just going at it alone, you wouldn't get very far.
Mhm.
But like you said, you've got to ask the question, and and just as you can still pursue the shoulds, but just know their shoulds, and then
Yeah.
ask and know why you're doing them, and know, okay, well, if I'm like mostly shoulding at the moment,
Yeah.
is this going to be forever, or am I going to make a conscious choice that this is a phase, and then at some point or over time, I'm going to strategically start focusing on the things that I really want, because it's not sustainable otherwise. That's where breakups happen. That's where estranged, you know, child and parent relationships happen. That's why businesses fail.
Mhm.
It's the repressed and unconnected shoulds that just blow up in resentment. See it all the time.
Yeah.
So you might not be able to change your life overnight. Most people won't be able to, but just know what path you're on and know the impact it's going to have and find a way to start bringing some of those real ones into your life
Mm.
soon.
Yes, dude. Yes. That's a beautiful place to end the deep questions. Otherwise, we're going to keep going. So, thank you for all the knowledge, all the experience that you just brought, man. I appreciate that. I've got a few fun, lighter questions to wrap with. Are you game?
Sure.
All right, cool. First one, what is your favorite book?
Well, apart from the Surrender Experiment, which we've mentioned already, one of the recent ones which I loved was The Comfort Crisis
Ooh,
by, is it Michael Easter? Um, it
yes.
made me deeply yearn to go to Alaska and hunt for 30 days and live in. It sounds horrendous, but I want to do it.
Dude. Oh, I love that book too. My wife read that book and she also was like, this is a great book. She's usually not into nonfiction. And like you, after reading that book, I was inspired where next year, one of my personal adventures is going to be to do a men's hunting retreat where I go and learn and ideally hunt and experience what that's like from end to end. Like I want the suffering. I want the like out in the bitter cold or whatever the environment is. So, dude, yes, I love that book as well. Great choice. All right, number two. What animal would you choose to be if you had to be?
Spaniel.
Say it again.
Spaniel.
Oh,
I'd
all right.
definitely, I'd definitely be a spaniel. They're my spirit animal, big time.
Yeah.
You only have to watch a dog, especially spaniels, because they're mental. Just the essence of presence. It's like they just the way they stare at a tennis ball when it's in the grass. Like that is their world. It's like nothing else exists. Their tail is going mental. Their body's shaking. They're like, "Oh my God, this ball is amazing. Oh my God, running for the ball again is amazing. Oh my God, jumping into this water is amazing. Oh my God, you're amazing. This is fun." Like we could learn a lot from them. So I think if I came back, I don't necessarily believe in it, but if I did come back, I would hope to be a spaniel in a loving family.
Dude, that's so real. I mean, you're quick with that, and I see that.
You tell I've thought it before.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. All right, man. Last question. What's one of your favorite childhood memories?
Hmm, I would say it would be going outside. We used to go every year or every couple of years, we'd go to stay in a cottage in the middle of the Brecon Beacons, which is a forest, sort of national park area in South Wales. It was a neighbor who owned this cottage and it was derelict out. So his dad built it back in the 60s or whatever, run down. There was dust and rats and bloody insects all over the place. You have to go and light the fire just to warm the place up. The beds were dirty, and it was proper. It was a proper hovel, and it.
Mhm.
We used to have to. We had a Land Rover Discovery, and we would drive down this dirt track, which when you were a kid felt like about 9 miles. It was probably about 300 yards, but through the forest to get there. And then my dad would sometimes take shortcuts down the hill. It wasn't a track through the trees, and we'd go. I shot my first shotgun out there when I was about 11, and it was amazing. Just like lads' time. I don't remember fighting when we were there. I remember trying to learn to swing from the bunk bed down to the single bed using the beam in the middle, and I got it wrong, and I just fell from the ceiling height, bang onto my back, and it was just, it was just great fun. I used to love it.
Love that. Wow. I just as you describe that, I go back to that world and envision what it was like. It's funny too, the way you started your answer, you started with it would be going outside and then you shifted into this beautiful memory. But I just want to acknowledge that part of your gift is helping people remember the value of that, is remembering whether it's going to this, amazing cottage or doing a day away, which is a cool thing you practice, which we didn't even get time to talk about. Is that, dude, that's part of your gift, it's part of your essence. I think it's one of the many reasons that I just align with you on so many things. So beautiful memory, man. This was a gift. Thank you for being here, creating space for this. Anything else left unsaid?
No, mate. Other than the pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me on. I could chat for hours. I'm conscious that I get very excited about this stuff. If anyone wants to connect with me, if I can help anyone in any way, even if it's just prompting a different question, sending them a resource or anything like that, then feel free to get in touch. I'd be happy to help.
Absolutely. Yep, we will definitely link to your things. And if I haven't said it enough, please subscribe to Jim's newsletter. I promise it will create some value in your life.